obviously from the evidence we've discussed, and from Rachel. And that there was a premeditated killing of Lindy Dobbins, and I want to spend a little bit of time right here. What do we know about his ability to reflect and make the intent to kill Lindy Dobbins? We know that Amanda screams, "He's not in there. He's not in there." He was looking for Lamar. They're telling him he's not in there. Rachel testified that Amanda also, during this time into running in the closet and getting into that situation in the bathroom with him, that she says, "It's Rachel and Lindy, it's Rachel and Lindy," referring, that's who's in the closet. He knows, he's been told who's in the closet, but that doesn't stop him. He shoots Amanda, as we know, and then that doesn't stop him. He turns his attention back to the closet, shoots his way into the closet, and then upon walking in and clearly seeing Lindy there with her long, dark hair pulled back, he executed her as she was hiding. The best friend that he felt was as in her ear in his words and meddling in their relationship. And you saw where she was, and it's clear who she is as she's hiding in the closet. And you saw this very, very intentional execution-style shot she took to the head. I want to move now on to count 3 in this case, the attempted first-degree murder of Lamar Dubberly. In attempted first-degree murder, there's 3 elements. You heard them explained again, but it's that the defendant did some act intending to cause the death of Lamar Dubberly that went just beyond thinking about it. And as we know here, we know that he began shooting into the home, and he was yelling, "Where is he? Where is he?" He knew he was there. He clearly knew he was there. He went there looking for him. Those words were heard from the backyard. He believed Lamar was there, and he entered the home and began searching for him still. And you can hear some of that on the 911 calls. Where is he? It's the same thing, all of the evidence we've been discussing before as it relates to wanting to go there and shoot and kill Amanda and Lamar apply here. And that the act would have resulted in the death of Lamar Dubberly, except that someone prevented the defendant from killing him or he failed to do so. Obviously, in this case, when he shot into the home, he failed to kill Lamar. He wasn't hit, and then Lamar ran and escaped. So at that point, Mr. Colley was unable to kill him, even though that was his intent. I want to move on to count 4, the attempted first-degree murder as to Rachel Hendricks. In this case, as to Rachel, we have both theories again that we've been discussing this morning, and I'll go over those with you here as they apply to Rachel. That again, the defendant did an act intending to cause Rachel's death that went beyond thinking about it or talking about it. So what do we have as to Rachel? Similar as to Lindy, that he shot into a closet after being told Rachel and Lindy were in there. That closet was being barricaded. If you recall Rachel's testimony, she wasn't letting him in. He was getting resistance. You can see the damage to the door after having kicked it and things of that nature. He knew human beings were inside that closet. He was being told they were Rachel and Lindy, and he continued to kick and shoot his way in. That he acted with a premeditated design to kill Rachel as well. Again, after he's being begged to stop, he turns and shoots Amanda, and that's not good enough. He keeps going. He said he was going to shoot, and then he shot into the closet. He knew what he was doing. And then again, that it would have resulted in her death, but for the fact it was prevented or he failed to do so. And obviously, thankfully, the bullet that entered the closet merely grazed her arm, and then she was able to escape out of the closet as he walked past her. So he failed in doing so. And again, we have the attempted felony murder. That he committed a burglary, as we know, on that date of that marital home on Bellagio, and that during the commission of the burglary, he committed an intentional act. That's not an essential element of burglary. And in this case, that's the act of shooting him in the closet after being told who was in there and knowing that there were people in the closet. And that it could have but did not cause the death of Rachel Hendricks. So as you see, the elements are very similar between the two, the difference being the premeditated intent, which we know he had, and the fact that he was committing a burglary when he was doing these things. Count 5 is burglary of a dwelling while armed with an assault and battery. Count 5 and count 6, you will see, are both they're both labeled burglary. Count 5 is the burglary that occurred at the time of the homicide. This is the burglary that occurred at 10:30 in the morning. Okay, count 6 is going to be the burglary in the middle of the night we're talking about. Again, we've talked about a lot of this, but these elements is that he entered in the home that was in the possession of Amanda, which we've talked about, and I showed you the injunction, which gave exclusive possession of that home to Amanda. He was not allowed to go near in that home. At the time of entering, he had the intent to commit an assault or battery. That's the elements of burglary. And we know that not only did he intend to commit an assault or battery, but in this case, a homicide. You'll get and you have been read the instructions on the assault and battery, and I've got them here for you. Obviously, he assaulted and battered both Lindy and Amanda inside this home, and also Rachel, for that matter. That all occupants of the home were scared when the gunfire rang out, and they ran away from it because they feared the violence was about to take place. And then a battery is nothing more than a simple intentional touching or striking of another person that's against their will. So if he'd have walked in that house, and instead of using a gun, he'd have punched somebody. That's a battery. It's an intentional touching. So is shooting someone with a firearm. It's not only a battery, it's homicide. And that during this, when you get your verdict form at the end of the case, you will have your verdict, and then you'll be asked a series of questions. And one of those is about whether he was armed with a firearm, possessed a firearm, discharged a firearm, and as we know, he did discharge, causing the death to Amanda and Lindy while he was in that house. Same elements as to count 6. Count 6 is just the burglary that occurred in the 4 o'clock hour in the morning. What's the evidence that we know he did that? We know he did that. You heard Mike Dickens say that the defendant admitted he did that. The defendant left the home, showed Mike Dickens the adult toys he found in the home. Mike Dickens told you, he even texted him afterwards, like, you shouldn't have done that, you're going to get in trouble. Okay, we have that admission by the defendant that he did that. We also have cell phone evidence. We have the mapping from the night before. It puts him there, 4:41 a.m., that call to Mike Dickens. He's hitting a tower near the Mirabella neighborhood, and we know from his phone itself that he took photographs of those toys that logged in his phone at approximately 3:47 a.m. So we know he's there, and we know that home was in the possession exclusively of Amanda. And at the time he entered on that night, the 4 o'clock-ish hour, that burglary, he had the intent to commit a stalking, a theft, or a criminal mischief. What do we know about that? We know that when he arrived, Amanda wasn't there. Amanda was with Lamar. He went to a home that he was not allowed to go to, forbidden by the court to go to, found out his wife wasn't there, so he went inside. And by going inside and ransacking and stealing items from that home, he was committing stalking, theft, and criminal mischief for his damage inside the home. And I just wanted to remind you of some of that by showing you these photos, and you saw a lot of them in evidence in this case. Obviously the damage to the television, the clothes strewn about, all evidence of his activities in the house that night. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, count 7 for your consideration is aggravated stalking. And in this case, there's 3 elements to aggravated stalking that the judge went over with you. The first one is that the defendant knowingly, willfully, maliciously followed, harassed Amanda Colley. In this case, he is charged for the time period on 8/27. Everything that occurred on August 27th, from starting after breaking into the home, all throughout the morning. He broke in the home, which is an act of following her and harassing her. The harassing texts and calls began shortly thereafter, And we know they continued all the way up to and after court. And then obviously the ultimate act of stalking, following, and harassing her and showing up back to the marital home wherein he killed her and her best friend. We know at the time of doing all of these activities, he had an injunction for protection against him, and the court had imposed a prohibition of conduct on him. He wasn't allowed to see her, and that's listed in the injunction. The third element of aggravated stalking is that he had to know that the injunction or the prohibition against him had been entered. And of course, you heard from Deputy Pittman in this case, who works in civil process, and he told you that he served that injunction on the defendant in this case on August 10th, 2015, which is obviously weeks before this activity. And there's no doubt that the defendant knew he was not allowed to be in the home that night. The judge read you instructions earlier, and he told you that in this case that you must return a verdict for the highest offense proven beyond a reasonable doubt. We've heard a lot about lesser included charges, but your duty is to hold the state to its burden and return a verdict for the highest charge proven beyond a reasonable doubt. It will soon be time for you to consider all of this evidence in the case in making that decision. And when you go back into the jury room, I want you to not forget some of the evidence in this case when you consider premeditation and the major charges in this case of first-degree murder. I don't want you to forget about all the choices he made on August 27th, all the time he had to reflect. Don't forget that he could have left court and gone to work. Don't forget he could have let his issues with Amanda go. You heard he had a new girlfriend as well, Amy Mason. They had plans to go to a wedding. Could have let it go, but he couldn't. Don't forget that he returned to that house on Garrison and obtained those firearms. That he drove 15 miles. It's a long time to think about what you're about to do. Don't forget that when he didn't find Lamar inside the home, that didn't stop him. He could have left, he could have run out the front door looking for him. But it didn't stop him. When he couldn't find Lamar, he continued to hunt and hunt for him. Decisions. Don't forget the words of Amanda Colley as she was pleading for him to stop. His dad begged him not to do it. People are telling him to stop, but he's not listening. And even after she's shot and he kills Amanda and she hears him kill her friend, she still says, no, 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 please don't, upon his return, as she's shot and killed 8 times. And don't forget the words of Lindy Dollins and how she knew she was going to die. She heard him shoot Amanda outside the closet. She felt the shot go through her foot. But he didn't stop. Don't forget, he went in that closet. He didn't have to. And don't forget the testimony of Rachel Hendricks and Lamar Dubberly, what they heard and what they witnessed on that day, and how it ties all of the evidence in this case together. That the evidence in this case will lead you to the only lawful decision, and that the state will be back before you asking you to return a verdict of guilty as charged as to all 7 counts in the indictment. Thank you.
Your event, Jerry, do you want to add anything to break at this point? Okay, good. Continue on with the defense.
Excuse me? Could you stand up for a second?
Absolutely. Stand up, spread out the front. We'll take a break after the defense closing argument before we get into this case.
me the fortitude that I ask for, and I can move on. Just let me go. Those are the things that James Colley had been asking his wife for some time, as he knew what was going on in her life. As he knew that there was a relationship between her and another man. But she continues to tell him, no, it's not what you think. There's nobody else. He cuts my yard. He helps out around the house. Our 5-year-old son is a liar. All the text messages you see in here, everything he's asking, just let me know, and I'll go. I'll get out of your life. But no, she can't. She keeps holding on to him. She keeps holding him back in. And it's like I stated in opening. Every time he tried to back up, she'd pull him back in. He'd try to move out, she'd pull him back in. Over and over and over. Now, we know that they were seeing each other during the time of the move out. Many witnesses have told you that they saw them together. They saw him in the house. Mike Dickens said he saw him outside, acting as a family, when they went to the park, in the backyard, hanging out, doing things. Rhonda Colley says, I saw him on FaceTime on the 25th. The 25th, 2 days before this terrible, terrible incident occurred. Crystal Wright says, I saw her on the 25th at my sister's house, pulling out of the driveway, leaving. And I yelled at my brother for having any type of relationship with her. She kept bringing him back in and not allowing him to move on. He asked her to go to counseling in these text messages. There's nothing. He asked her to talk to him. There's nothing. It's just a constant over, and over. And we know that she hadn't moved on because let's look at the house. Look at some of the photos that the state had introduced during their testimony. And if you look at this one in particular, it's 2 months after Mr. Colley's moved out. And what's on the wall still? Family photograph. Family photograph still up there. If you look at the further picture down the road of the closet upstairs, there's men's hunting outfits. I'm telling you, a photo. Again, introduced in James by the state. Hunting outfits. James Colley hadn't moved out. And if you look at the master closet, there's still men's clothing in the back of the closet. Mr. Colley was not out of the house. Mr. Colley was not out of Amanda's life. I know there was an injunction, and I know that he wasn't supposed to have contact with her. But Mrs. Colley was having just as much contact with James as he was with her. And if you look at everything that was taking place during that time frame, his family being dangled in front of him, his kids being dangled in front of him, helping whenever he can. But then, when he has the children, it's silent, just like in the text messages. I don't hear from you all weekend when I have the kids. Now you're calling me, what's up? Now you're texting me, what's going on? That's the way it was over and over and over. When Deputy Pittman gave him the injunction, I thought it was interesting as to where they met to be served with the injunction. And if you remember, it was at the Publix in Mirabel. Deputy Pittman said, yeah, I was surprised to find out later that's about a quarter of a mile from the 260 Bellagio address. Why? I send it to you. That's where James was when he got the call. Still, he gets served with an injunction. He's still with his wife. And his wife knows he gets an injunction. But it's okay, because I have the kids, so let's help me out. People saw them together all the time. And it was this emotional roller coaster, back and forth, that led to these terrible, terrible events. Now, if you look at the 27, the state's charged him with burglary from going in the early morning hours. He texted with his wife earlier. She told him she was sick. She had a migraine. I'm going to sleep it out. He goes over to the house. She's not there. Nobody's there. But then he does find those toys. And he does ransack the place. But if you think he didn't have the right to be there when he was constantly going there all the time, or that he was always invited over, and he had a relationship with her in that house, then look at the burglary. But I would argue that it's more of a trespass based on the fact that she allowed him in the house. She allowed him to come in, and that is the lesser included, trespass. James goes back to his sister's house after he meets with Mike, and if you remember, Mike says he was upset. He was angry, but he was upset. He was crying. He was hurt because of what he had found. And he goes back to his sister's house. He doesn't sleep. The state showed you text messages all night long. Doesn't go to sleep. And then while he's up in the morning, he sees Tammy Folsom. And Tammy Folsom tells you that he was normal to me. He wasn't mad. He wasn't upset. Just regular old JR cleaning out his pickup truck. That's all she saw. Then he goes to court. He's with his attorney, Kyle Bedroom. Kyle said everything went fine. He was happy to be. No problems. He gave me a hug and left. Didn't see any issues. He's driving up the road, and then we hear about that 941 phone call. Ms. Dunton just told you that the 941 phone call occurred while he was going up State Road 16. As he's going up State Road 16, he has 2 guns in his car. He has 45 and a 9mm. Now, the state wants you to believe that he drove all the way back to get the guns. And you can hear, I didn't hear anybody say anything about moron in that recording, the butt dial, but they want you to believe he went all the way back to get the guns. But the testimony today is that the guns were already in the car. Now, Rhonda Colley may have been mistaken as to which guns, but she has always said 2 guns in the car. 40 or 45, and today she said the 9mm. Back when she first met with Detective Sergeant Fuller, she said she thought it was the 380, but she wasn't sure. And when I cross-examined him, I said, was she unsure about what it was? And he said, yeah, she was unsure. She was going back and forth. She was unsure. But there's always been 2 guns in the car. If that 941 phone call had caused this to happen, he would have just continued going up State Road 16. He would have gone up to the east entrance in Mirabella, and Bellagio isn't far from there. He'd have been there way before the 10:30 frame. Would have carried this out way earlier. That 941 call is what did it to him. No, he's going home. He's going to work. For some reason, he does decide to stop at the house. I have no idea. I know, like I said, the state wants you to believe he went there to get guns, but he already had the 2 guns in the car. That was his intent. Once he's at the Garrison Ave house, he then goes to the Speedway. And he gets 2.765 gallons of gas. 2.765 gallons of gas. Doesn't seem like much gas for a getaway, does it? Why would he only get 2.765 gallons of gas if he was planning on shooting up a house and taking off to Virginia? Because there was no intent for him to do that. There's no indication that he was going to do that. Now, I know the state's going to say, and they already said, well, he had to top it off, but I submit to you, at 2.7 gallons of gas, it still says full on your car. So he didn't top it up, he just put in enough to get to work and back. It wasn't his car, why fill it up for your sister? So he does end up going to the Bellagio address. And I don't know why he went there. I can only conclude that he was trying to fix things because he knew what happened the night before. He knew that he had damaged the TVs. He knew that he had thrown some things around the house. He was going back to try to fix what he did. And then unfortunately after that, when we hit this terrible chain of events. I don't know what happened to set him off. The state doesn't know what happened to set him off. I have no idea, but I can tell you that he already had the guns, and if he was going to go over there to do this, he would have gone straight from court. As far as where he parked, the state says, we know he parked on Porter Rosa. They think he parked on Porter Rosa, but they don't know that for sure because Deputy Merritt with the K-9 said, I have no idea where that dog tracked, who it tracked. It tracked somebody that walked over that knoll, but nobody ever saw him walk over the knoll. Nobody, she can't tell you. She said, I can't tell you whether that was James Cowley's scent or not because they didn't do a scent from a specific item of clothing. They just did one from the latest person that went through there. I asked, could there have been two kids running through the yard? Yeah, it could have been. But we do know that Rachel Hendricks says she heard a shot and she looked out the sliding glass door and saw James Cowley. Now, he's charged with attempted first-degree murder of Lamar Dauberly from that shooting. There's two shots. There's two shots in the wall. But what I think you need to look at is when you go back and deliberate is where Lamar Dauberly said he was standing. Lamar said that he was standing off to the right, looking at this picture, and I wanted to make sure I could get a good understanding where he was, behind where the couches are equal. So he was way over in this corner. Way over in this corner. The shots are way over here. I submit to you, the shooter couldn't even see Lamar Dauberly based on where he was shooting from. And based on where Lamar Dauberly said he was standing. So unless you can just shoot into a house and get charged with attempted first-degree murder, not even seeing the person that's there, I submit it's overcharged. Maybe what we could convict him of is attempted manslaughter by act, because that is an act by shooting in that could cause a death, possibly cause a death, but you can't premeditate to kill somebody you can't see. You can't kill somebody you can't see. Lamar Dauberly never saw James Cowley, never even knew who James Cowley was. In addition, if you go back and look at where one of the spent cartridges were, you'll see approximately where the shooter was standing, because Mr. Pollard told you that a cartridge will go about 8 feet and it goes to the right. And if you look, that's where the cartridge was found. That means the shooter would have been standing further here to the left. You cannot see where Lamar Galbraith is standing. You can't. It's impossible to see him based on where he would have been shooting when the shot was fired and where Galbraith was standing. So again, at the best, maybe attempted manslaughter by act. As far as the attempted first-degree murder of Rachel Hendricks, once again, they're saying that the first-degree attempted murder comes from shooting through the door. You cannot shoot somebody that you don't know where they're standing. You cannot be convicted of murder when you don't know where you're shooting. Manslaughter? Absolutely. Attempted manslaughter by act. That's an act that could have caused somebody, could have caused death or severe bodily injury to somebody by doing that. So again, I would say on those two cases, attempted manslaughter. As far as the first degree premeditated murders of Amanda and Lindy Dobbins, premeditation is a conscious decision to do so, and it must be present in the mind at the time of. Now, the state wants you to believe that that 14-minute call is what caused this whole intent, this whole idea that he's going to go over and shoot up the house. But as I said before, he already had the guns in the car. If that was what triggered whatever happened, he would have gone straight from court, straight from that 14-minute phone call. He would have been there much earlier. He'd never gone back to Garrison. It was something else that caused all this, and we don't know when that is, and they haven't proved any intent of premeditation based on what happened at the Bellagio address. He never saw Lamar. Lamar never saw him. What happened to throw this all out? Nobody knows. But the state hasn't proven premeditation as to the deaths of Amanda Colley and Lindy Dobbins. I would say that it's a second-degree murder case, one in which a shooter acted with a depraved mind and not without regard for human life. You can find him guilty of that, maybe. But there hasn't been any proven premeditation based on what the state has said today or what the evidence shows. We kind of talked about the burglaries again. James was always invited, or he was at that house on numerous occasions after the injunction. And that's what they're basing it on. The injunction. That was the marital home. You saw the pictures, the clothes, the family photos, everything. That was still his marital home. He was staying there. He was hanging out there. I agree more that it should be a trespass with a firearm, and you'd have to look and confirm that there is a firearm based on the fact that he was being invited over there for family dinners, based on the fact that Tuesday night he was over there for a family dinner. And then the final charge of the aggravated stalking, that has to do with the injunction and the morning of the 27th. Again, because there was an injunction, theoretically, that fits. But again, you have to ask yourself, does that add up if he's there all the time? Does that add up if he's invited over? Does that add up if Amanda Colley has him over for dinner? Now, the judge is going to go through, or he did already go through most of the jury instructions. And one thing we talk about is reasonable doubt. And is it reasonable to believe that on August 27th, something just made James Colley snap? Is it reasonable to believe that he reacted rather than planned? Is it reasonable to believe that this is something that just happened like that? That he never intended for any of this to happen? I think so. Based on how much he loved his wife, based on how much he was trying to get back together with his wife, and I know it's saying that he had moved on, they had both moved on, but they were still hanging on to each other, and that's quite evident. Is it reasonable to think that something happened that led him into that house? I believe it is. I wish I knew what it was. We'll probably never know what that is. Also, the judge has told you already as far as Mr. Colley not testifying. And I know I found in a lot of other trials that juries like to hear somebody testify that they've been accused of something. But as the judge told you, the Constitution requires that the state to prove its accusations against the defendant. It's not necessary for the defendant to disprove anything, nor is the defendant required to prove his innocence. It's up to the state to prove the defendant's guilt by evidence. And the defendant exercised a fundamental right by choosing not to be a witness in this case. You must not view this statement as guilt. No juror should ever be concerned that the defendant did or did not take the case. I want you to remember that when we go back. I did want to touch on a few things that I wrote down, if I haven't already hit them. Again, I listened to that butt dial that they call it, and I didn't hear anything that said moron. One thing I did notice when she was showing the evidence, the pictures just now, there was a black holster on the floor, like a neoprene sleeve, but there was absolutely no testimony that that belonged or would fit a 9mm gun in. They want you now to think that it's a holster for the 9mm that fits into a pretty little story. But nobody, they have gun experts here, nobody said anything about the fact that that would hold a 9mm gun. Think about that. The text to Amy, they want you to think that that was his dying declaration, but I believe Ms. Mason stated that she figured it was in response to a previous text that she had sent him about an hour and a half earlier saying, "I love you," something that they did continuously. I talked about the adjacent street parking. And they brought up Ms. Meadows to, I don't know, to show that she heard something, I guess, but they brought it up at about the same point they were talking about the parking, but Ms. Meadows stated that she never went outside of her fenced-in area. So nothing that Ms. Meadows saw or heard would lead you to believe that he was parking in an abandoned house on Porter Rosa Street. Ladies and gentlemen, bad decisions were running rampant in the Colley household back in August of 2015. And there are decisions that ended up forcing James to lose everything that he loved, everything that he lived for, everything that he wanted. Decisions that led, unfortunately, to the death of two wonderful ladies. Nothing good happened that day. These decisions will haunt James for the rest of his life.
courtroom. You can place your notes in the envelope and leave all the materials in the courtroom during the break. I'll go over the additional document that was left unshared when you came in. I'll discuss that when we break today. But it is currently 5 minutes till 3 o'clock, so I'll ask you to be ready at 3:15. At 3:15, we'll be back in the jury lounge, and as soon as we have everybody gathered up, we'll bring you back. Thank you, folks, for following us. Please. seated in the courtroom. Y'all had a good break. Everybody situated, we are ready to proceed, so we'll now proceed with the state's final and closing argument. State, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Shoemaker began this trial in his opening statement by telling you that this wouldn't be a case of whodunit, but it would be why. And he just stood before you and explained why. The defense just told you that Amanda Colley is the reason why. That she is the reason this happened. She didn't give him the fortitude he needed. She didn't tell the truth. She wouldn't confirm what he already knew was true. It's her fault. That's what the defendant just told you. Whose fault is it that Lindy Dobbins is dead? Is that Amanda's fault too? He used words like emotional roller coaster. Absolutely. Divorces, injunctions, co-parenting, things that couples deal with when they're separated is emotional. It's what you do with those emotions that are important. Obviously, what Mr. Colley did is not appropriate. It's murder, and he's here, as we know, to get across his point that she's evil, she's a bitch, and it's her fault. That's what he just stood up here and told you. The defense talked in their closing about this back and forth. And you need to rely on your memories, but they characterize it as all the time they're together during this time. What was the evidence really? And who did that evidence come from? That evidence came from family members and the best friend and family friends of the defendant, Ron McCauley, Crystal Colley, Tammy Folsom, a little bit previous with Mike Dickens. Was it all the time? Crystal saw them together once between the separation, and that was on the 25th, when she just saw Amanda leaving Garrison. And Rhonda told you about that occasion too. Look at those text messages that the defense entered today. You'll see what was going on the 25th. On the 25th, the children were suspected of having lice. It's all this going on in those text messages. They're meeting up. They're exchanging information about the children during the day and later that night. They're co-parenting the best way that Amanda can, understanding that she wants no contact, she has an injunction, and this man refuses to acknowledge laws and rules. And here today, he wants you to buy into that. He wants you to not don't like what Amanda was doing. Don't like that she was having an affair, as was he, before their divorce was final. It's fine. Probably things that we all would say are not advisable. You may not like that as you sit there on the jury. But what he's asking you to do with the fact that you may not like what's going on is hold that against Amanda Colley and somehow minimize his responsibility legally for the premeditated murder of these two women. That's what he's asking you to do here today. The individuals that talked about this all the time contact, which we really only heard about the 25th this morning. Again, like I said, they're family friends, family members, and the best friend of the defendant. People with the most motive and bias for the defendant. People that were shown this morning to not be telling the truth and to be given inconsistent statements. Rhonda has no clue what guns she claims she put in that car because she didn't put them in her car. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. What did she say? Initially it was a 380. Maybe it was a 45. Then she gave other statements, but she's very sure when she comes into court today, and until confronted with all those other previous statements, she's very sure it's the two murder weapons. You saw the demeanor and the testimony of those witnesses, and you are instructed to take that into consideration in weighing their testimony in this case. Mr. Shoemaker spent a bit of time talking about this voicemail. The voicemail, the butt dial that was left on Amanda Colley's voicemail during this time when he was at the house. The evidence, additionally, that shows that he went there to get those guns. And I'm going to turn it up, and I want you to listen to this voicemail again. That voicemail of his dad, his family member, calling him a moron, the same person that tried to stop him from doing these things. Mr. Shoemaker stood up here and said that those guns weren't in the car. Or those guns were in the car, excuse me. Those guns were in the car. He didn't go back to Southampton to get them. Mr. Shoemaker tried to make a point in saying that if that 14-minute call was what really set this off, he's saying it wasn't, of course. If that was what really set him off, well, the guns were in the car, so he would have just driven there. No, isn't the converse of that true? Why did he have to go home and get the guns? They weren't in the car, that's true. If the guns were just in the car, he would have gone over there. We know that's the last phone contact between Amanda and James. Something happened in the phone call, and he didn't just keep driving down 16 to the house. He had to go back and retrieve his guns. We know he went back. We have cell phone data to put him in the area. We have the voicemail putting him at that house with his family. Someone's calling him a moron as he ransacks that house and takes guns and ammunition out of that bedroom and gets into a car. Mr. Shoemaker talks about topping off with gas. Ladies and gentlemen, you will use your common sense, and we implore you to use your common sense when you go back in that jury room and talk. Do you top off? Keep in mind, Mr. Colley was driving all around to and from court that morning, so he didn't have some gas. Do you top off your tank of gas because you fully intend on going to work, just 10 minutes up the road from 210 in Jacksonville, or do you top off your tank of gas because you don't know when the next time it is that you're going to stop, and you need all the gas you need to get out of Dodge? Nobody tops their car off with gas. Their sister's car, as he pointed out, which isn't even his car, because I'm going to go 10 minutes up the road to Citibank and go to work. Mr. Shoemaker spent some time talking about the attempt charges in this case, the attempted murder against Lamar and the attempted murder against Rachel. And he told you that you couldn't find the defendant guilty of the attempted murder charges because he didn't, maybe, if you believe it, he didn't see them. Look at the elements that the judge instructed you on when you go back in the jury room. There's not an element that says the defendant must see the person. What are the elements? That he had the intent to kill, which we know he did, that he took an act beyond thinking of it, which he did when he shot through the back windows of that house, and he further shot his way into the closet, and that he failed to do so. Those charges have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt in this case, based on everything that's been presented to you thus far. Mr. Shoemaker also talked to you about burglary versus trespass. He's asking you to come back and return a verdict of trespass. Of course he is. Rules don't apply to him. Injunctions don't apply to him. Court orders forbidding contact, court orders forbidding him to go within 500 feet of a resident don't apply to him. So in his mind, this was just a trespass. Under the law, ladies and gentlemen, it's a burglary. You have the elements before you, and the elements are that the home was in possession of someone else, Amanda Colley, and that he entered with the intent to commit offenses therein. And you have those before you on those applicable charges and the various burglaries. Like I said before, he the defendant, He wants you to blame Amanda. He wants you to somehow take that blame and mitigate against his premeditated intent. The same things, the same scenario, him thinking that she was lying to him and not telling the truth, is the same situation which caused him to have the feelings towards her, the feelings of hate, the feelings that she's evil, the feelings that she's a bitch, all of the feelings, all of the motive that led him to all of his decisions on August 27th. On August 27th, he was the judge, the jury, and the executioner of Amanda's behavior. And subsequently after that, of Lindy's, when he found her instead of Lamar. He is now telling you to be that jury and not hold him to the law, but to judge her, Amanda Colley, for being with another man, even though he was with another woman, and not confirming it to him. Was this a difficult time for the Colleys? Absolutely. Was it emotional? Absolutely. I don't think anybody would argue that divorces in these scenarios are absolutely emotional, painful times. But what do most people do? If you're going to stay together, you go to counseling. You surround yourself with family and friends. You put distance between yourself and the other person. You get a divorce. You do things to move on. Not him. Not the defendant. Instead, he took everything out on Amanda Colley that day. Once it was confirmed in his mind that what he believed to be true was true, he couldn't live with it. He went there to hunt them down and kill them. And when he couldn't find Lamar, he found Amanda. He took it out on her once when he shot her. He took it out on Lindy when he found her instead of Lamar. And then he returned back. He found her alive. And in that instant, he chose to finish her off. Jury, judge, and executioner. All of this evidence shows his premeditation, and the state asks you to return a verdict in this case as charged as to all 7 counts as the evidence supports. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the closing arguments of the attorneys. Let me talk to you about where we're going from here. It's about 3:35 p.m. right now. In many cases, I would send a jury out to deliberate at this point of the day. However, as I discussed with you during jury selection, in this type of case, if the jury is not able to reach a verdict in the day they start deliberating, I am required by law to sequester the jury overnight. That's why I'm going to bring you back in the morning, tomorrow morning at our regular time, in order to have a few preliminary instructions with you, but then you'll be able to deliberate your verdict all day long. However, because there is the chance that a jury might not reach a verdict in one day, I am going to ask that you pack an overnight bag in the event we have an overnight sequester. The overnight bag would have obviously clothing, medications, toiletries, whatever you need in the event of an overnight sequester. But you will have this case to deliberate in the early part of the morning, so you'll have a full day to do that. On your chairs, when you came back during one of the breaks, were 2 pages. So I want to talk about that. And you'll take these 2 pages home with you tonight. This gives you directions on where to park tomorrow. So when you come into the parking lot, there will be a designated area for you to park. There will be a deputy there at all times. It will be roped off in the event you have to spend a night with us as a sequestered jury. However, you'll see there's a little area circled. What we want first is for you to bring your bags to that little area, or not bags, hopefully not a lot of bags, but your bag, overnight bag, to that little area. There'll be a deputy there. That deputy will take your bag, will bring it inside. It does have to be scanned, like at an airport, or anything that comes into the courthouse has to be scanned. They'll take the bag in, and then you'll go park at that designated area. Come on into the courtroom. We'll have you come back at 8:45 again tomorrow, so as soon as we have everybody up here, we'll get you in here. As I mentioned to you during the preliminary instructions last week, was that while you were able to have your phones and electronic devices during the course of the trial, you cannot have them when you deliberate your verdict in this case. So please leave them in your car. That will be phones, tablets, any type of electronic communication device, including smartwatches. They tell me to read about smartwatches these days, unless your watch is disconnected from your phone and you can shut the Bluetooth off of your phone. In the event you forget to leave it in the car, that's fine. I understand sometimes people are tethered to their phones now or just are so used to having them in their pockets or purses that they bring it in. Well, so they'll have a deputy that can secure that for you overnight. So those will be the instructions for you in the morning. When you come back in the morning, as soon as we have everybody together, I'll get you back up here. I'll have a few instructions for you. Nothing like the instructions I gave you earlier. It's just the last 3 pages of the big book that I gave you earlier. When I'm done with that, then you'll be able to deliberate your verdict in this case. So that should be around 9:30ish or so. I'll also go over with you the verdict forms and explain those to you in great detail so you can understand what those are all about. So overnight, let me again caution you, don't do any research of any type. Don't discuss this case with anybody. It's going to be the last time I tell you that for an overnight. Because once you are deliberating, obviously you can discuss this case amongst yourselves. We encourage you to do that. That'll be part of the instructions tomorrow. But overnight, again, no discussions with anybody about the case, no research. Please do not look at, read, or listen to any media accounts of the trial. There are media accounts. And I'll ask you that same question in the morning as to whether or not anybody has seen any media accounts of it. So that's it for today. Again, 8:45 tomorrow in the jury lounge. You actually will end up deliberating in the jury lounge. There's a room off to the side. I don't know if anybody noticed it when you were in there, which is a larger jury room than the one we have here because there are so many of you. I'll have you deliberate there. It's a little more comfortable with the coffee, the snacks, and the water. We'll make sure that's going. All right, so with that, I wish everybody a good night. Leave everything here. Leave the notes. Leave the jury instructions. But take the 2-page instructions and that with you so you have that when you come back. See everybody in the morning. Everybody else remain.
this act, obviously from the evidence we've discussed and from Rachel. And that there was a premeditated killing of Lindy Dobbins. And I want to spend a little bit of time right here. What do we know about his ability to reflect and make the intent to kill Lindy Dobbins? We know that Amanda screams, "He's not in there. He's not in there." He was looking for Lamar. They're telling him he's not in there. Rachel testified that Amanda also, during this time into running in the closet and getting into that situation in the bathroom with him, that she says, "It's Rachel and Lindy, it's Rachel and Lindy," referring that's who's in the closet. He knows, he's been told who's in the closet, but that doesn't stop him. He shoots Amanda, as we know, and then that doesn't stop him. He turns his attention back to the closet, shoots his way into the closet, and then upon walking in and clearly seeing Lindy there with her long dark hair pulled back, he executed her as she was hiding. The best friend that he felt was as in her ear in his words and meddling in their relationship. And you saw where she was, and it's clear who she is as she's hiding in the closet. And you saw this very, very intentional execution style shot she took to the head. I want to move now on to count 3 in this case, the attempted first-degree murder of Lamar Dubberly. In attempted first-degree murder, there's 3 elements. You heard them explained again, but it's that the defendant did some act intending to cause the death of Lamar Dubberly that went just beyond thinking about it. And as we know here, we know that he began shooting into the home, and he was yelling, "Where is he? Where is he?" He knew he was there. He clearly knew he was there. He went there looking for him. Those words were heard from the backyard. He believed Lamar was there, and he entered the home and began searching for him still. And you can hear some of that on the 911 calls. Where is he? It's the same thing, all of the evidence we've been discussing before as it relates to wanting to go there and shoot and kill Amanda and Lamar apply here. And that the act would have resulted in the death of Lamar Dubberly, except that someone prevented the defendant from killing him or he failed to do so. Obviously, in this case, when he shot into the home, he failed to kill Lamar. He wasn't hit, and then Lamar ran and escaped. So at that point, Mr. Colley was unable to kill him, even though that was his intent. I want to move on to count 4, the attempted first-degree murder as to Rachel Hendricks. In this case, as to Rachel, we have both theories again that we've been discussing this morning, and I'll go over those with you here as they apply to Rachel. That again, the defendant did an act intending to cause Rachel's death that went beyond thinking about it or talking about it. So what do we have as to Rachel? Similar as to Lindy, that he shot into a closet after being told Rachel and Lindy were in there. That closet was being barricaded. If you recall Rachel's testimony, she wasn't letting him in. He was getting resistance. You can see the damage to the door after having kicked it and things of that nature. He knew human beings were inside that closet. He was being told they were Rachel and Lindy, and he continued to kick and shoot his way in. That he acted with a premeditated design to kill Rachel as well. Again, after he's being begged to stop, he turns and shoots Amanda, and that's not good enough. He keeps going. He said he was going to shoot, and then he shot into the closet. He knew what he was doing. And then again, that it would have resulted in her death, but